Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I hope everyone is enjoying their day. Please subscribe and like the video before continuing. The Young and the Restless spoilers. Sharon's cringeworthy moment and disappointing Nick reunion in France. The Young and the Restless spoilers and updates tease that Newman, Sharon Case, may be in for a world-class embarrassment on the global stage. Get updates on the latest news about The Young and the Restless straight to your inbox. We use your personal data for interest-based advertising as outlined in our privacy notice. What is this? Could Sharon's efforts to reconnect with Nick Newman, Joshua Morrow, fail disastrously on the romantic French Riviera, instead turning into a record-breaking flop? Phyllis Summers received troubling news in the episode that aired June 13. The episode on June 13 delivered some unsettling news for Phyllis Summers, Michelle Stafford, who was not pleased with Tessa Porter's Kate Fairbanks updates about Sharon. Upon learning that Sharon would be at Aristotle Dumas' party, Phyllis became worried about the chance of her old rival sabotaging her plans. Although they have come to an understanding and have been spending more time together, Phyllis maintained that she was fine with Sharon. However, Phyllis has a lot at stake on this trip and is determined to prevent Sharon from interfering. What is this? Phyllis even joked that Sharon might accidentally tumble into the Mediterranean if she realized Nick was there to rescue her. Sharon, the damsel in distress, and Nick, the knight in white armor. It's evident that Phyllis holds specific expectations regarding Sharon, the damsel in distress, and Nick, the knight in white armor. Nevertheless, Phyllis ultimately proposed that Sharon could humiliate herself on a worldwide platform pursuing Nick if she chooses to. What truly matters to Phyllis is preventing any possible interference related to Dumas. Given that Phyllis seems to foresee Sharon making a spectacle of herself over Nick during this trip, perhaps that serves as a clue about the direction of Sharon's narrative. Y&R spoilers suggest that some self-sabotage may be on the horizon, and this applies to Nick as well. Nick already says one thing and does another when it comes to Sharon. Nick's already making mistakes because he says one thing but does another. Though Nick insists they are just friends, he's likely leading Sharon on with all the travel they have done together. Nick really wanted Sharon to accompany him to Dumas' party, which may give her false hope if he doesn't actually want a romantic reunion. Meanwhile, Sharon is also making her own mistakes, as she might think that if she waits long enough, she will win Nick back in the end. What is this? While that could happen, there's also a chance that Sharon will humiliate herself just like Phyllis warned. Even if Sharon and Nick cross a romantic boundary on this trip, it doesn't guarantee a happily ever after back home. Be sure to catch up on everything happening with Y&R right now. Come back here often for the Young and the Restless spoilers, news, and updates. The sun was just beginning to rise over the quiet vineyards of Bordeaux, painting the horizon in pale shades of lavender and rose. It should have been the perfect setting for romance, the reunion that Sharon Newman had envisioned for weeks. But reality had other plans. Sharon stood at the edge of the cobbled terrace of her boutique French villa, nervously clutching the vintage wine glass in her hand. She had arrived in France 5 days ago, supposedly for a mental health retreat and wine therapy course, but her real reason was far more personal. She'd invited Nick. After months of subtle texting and a few flirtatious exchanges back in Genoa City, Sharon had dared to wonder, could there still be something between them? Nick had seemed warm, even nostalgic, when they last spoke at Crimson Lights. And when she'd offhandedly mentioned her trip, he said, "France sounds amazing. Who knows, maybe I'll join you for a few days." But now, as she waited with her heart pounding in her chest, a sense of dread gnawed at her. She was already regretting her choice of outfit, a silky wrap dress that felt more Valentine's Day than catching up as friends. The wind tugged at the hem as her phone buzzed. Text from Nick. "Landing now. See you in an hour." Sharon's stomach flipped. This was it. Act I. Uneasy beginnings. The reunion was awkward. Not that Nick wasn't charming. He always had been. He greeted her with a kiss on the cheek, warm hug, and a compliment about how the French countryside suited her. But Sharon instantly picked up on the dissonance in his energy. Something felt performative, like he was checking a box. His eyes flicked too quickly around the villa. He was polite, but distracted. He complimented her wine selection, yet didn't finish his glass. He smiled at her stories, but didn't laugh with his eyes. By the time they sat down for a late brunch on the patio, Sharon couldn't take it anymore. "So why did you really come, Nick?" He blinked, caught off guard by her directness. "You invited me." "I mentioned it. I didn't think you'd actually show up unless you wanted to." Nick sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I thought maybe this trip would help me clear my head. Things back home are messy." "Messy like Sally?" Sharon asked, arching an eyebrow. Nick hesitated. "She's part of it." There it was. The ghost of Sally Spectra hummed between them like a bitter perfume. Sharon suddenly felt ridiculous. She'd set up this whole romantic possibility in her head, only to realize she'd invited a man still carrying someone else's emotional baggage. Act high, though. The cringe-worthy moment, the low point, the absolute cringe, came that evening at a local wine tasting event. Sharon had pulled some strings and gotten them an invite to a private vineyard dinner, complete with music and dancing under the stars. She wore a soft blushed gown. Nick looked devastating in his navy suit. For a fleeting moment, Sharon allowed herself to believe they might salvage the night. Until the dancing started, a live band began playing a sultry French ballad. Couples twirled around them, and Sharon gently tugged Nick toward the floor. "Dance with me." He hesitated but eventually complied. They moved slowly, swaying more than truly dancing. And then, in a moment she would replay in her mind for years, Sharon leaned in too close, too fast. Maybe it was the wine, or maybe it was the years of shared history. But she kissed him. Not a soft, exploratory kiss. A full-on, eyes-closed, hopeful kiss. Nick pulled back instantly. "Sharon?" Mortified, Sharon stepped away. "I'm sorry. I thought." "No," he said gently. "You didn't misread it. I'm not there right now. Maybe I never was." She felt her cheeks flush crimson. People were looking. A violinist faltered mid-song. A waiter dropped a fork. It was a disaster. Act high. Tension and truth. The car ride back to the villa was suffocatingly silent. Sharon stared out the window, trying to compose herself. "I shouldn't have come," Nick finally said. "I think I wanted something from this trip that was never going to happen." "Closure?" she asked bitterly. "Maybe. Or maybe I was running away from decisions I need to make in Chennal City. Sally, Christian, Summer." Sharon blinked. "Summer?" Nick nodded. "She's been spiraling again. Kyle's situation isn't helping. She's angry all the time. And Faith. I feel like I'm failing as a father on all fronts." "You're not," Sharon said instinctively. "You're just overwhelmed." Nick looked at her, and for the first time all evening, his expression softened. "And what about you? Why did you really want me here?" Sharon hesitated. "Because I'm lonely, Nick, and tired of pretending I'm not. You've always been my safe place. But maybe that's not fair to you anymore." He reached over and took her hand. "I'll always care about you, Sharon, but I think we both need to stop going backward." She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Act IV. The morning after. The next morning, Sharon woke up alone. Nick had already left. He'd scribbled a note on the kitchen counter. "Thanks for reminding me who I used to be. Take care of yourself, always. Nick." She stared at the words for a long time before crumpling the paper. The sting was raw, but in a way, it also felt necessary. She spent the day walking the narrow streets of St. Emilion, trying to reconnect with herself. She had wanted this trip to be about healing, but had turned it into another pursuit of someone else's heart. Back in Chennal City, she had a business to run. She had clients who needed her. She had her kids, her friends, and most of all, herself. Epilogue. A spark of something new. 2 weeks later, Sharon returned to Crimson Lights. It was a quiet evening, the cafe half full. As she wiped down the counter, a familiar voice greeted her. Well, back from France already?" She looked up and smiled. Chance Chancellor stood before her, coffee in hand. "Don't tell me you missed me," she teased. Chance grinned. "Maybe I did." There was a long pause. "France was educational," she said, her tone wry. He raised an eyebrow. And disappointing? She laughed softly. Let's just say, I learned more about myself than I did about Bordeaux. Sounds like a trip worth taking. Sharon met his gaze, and for the first time in weeks, felt a spark that had nothing to do with the past. Maybe, just maybe, France hadn't been a mistake after all. The wind howled outside the walls of Newman Towers, where a storm was brewing that had nothing to do with weather. Inside, Sharon Roselles sat alone in her penthouse suite, her eyes swollen from tears, hands trembling around a cup of chamomile tea. Her usually serene demeanor had been shattered. Life had hit her in waves, relentless and cruel, and now she was barely staying afloat. Ray was gone. Diagnosed posthumously with an undetected heart condition, he had died behind the wheel months earlier. The grief never left her. It only tucked itself behind her daily routine. Faith had left for college. Noah was absorbed in his art and life with Allie. Even Maria and Tessa were nesting in their own world. And the one person who had always been able to make her feel grounded, Nick Newman, had grown distant, consumed by business, his children, and the complexities of his love life. Sharon was strong, but tonight, strength felt like a fairy tale. She wasn't just heartbroken, she was unraveling. Acti, a cry in the dark. It was nearly midnight when Sharon reached for her phone. She stared at it for long moments before typing. Sharon, I know it's late, but can you come over? The response came almost instantly. Nick, already on my way. Nick had always sensed when Sharon was in distress. It was something deeper than friendship or even romance. It was instinct. From the moment they met decades ago, something in her had spoken to the protector in him. No matter how many times they broke up, reunited, or dated others, that part of their connection never broke. When he arrived, he didn't knock. He entered quietly using the code she'd never change. Sharon was curled up on the couch, mascara smudged, her robe askew. He said nothing at first. He just sat beside her and gathered her into his arms. I didn't know who else to call, she whispered against his chest. You don't have to explain, he replied. You never have to explain anything to me. Actio. The depths of the damsel. Nick spent the night on the couch while Sharon slept in fits and starts. The next morning, he woke up early and made coffee. As he handed her a steamy mug, he noticed the hesitation in her fingers. She was unsteady. I had a panic attack last night, she confessed. First one in years. I thought I was past all that. I thought I had control. Nick knelt in front of her, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Sharon, you're not weak. You're just human. You've been carrying so much alone. She looked down, ashamed. I feel like I'm unraveling. He stood and pulled her to her feet. Then let me help you stitch the pieces back together. That day, Nick canceled all his meetings. He took Sharon to the park, to the lake, and to her favorite quiet bookstore. He didn't push her to talk. He simply reminded her what peace felt like. Act II, shadows of the past. As the days passed, Sharon began to feel a shift. With Nick around, she smiled more, laughed even. But their renewed closeness dredged up complicated feelings. She had loved Nick with all her heart once. Many times, actually. They had a tangled history. Marriages, divorces, children, heartbreak, healing. And now here he was again, her knight in white armor. But she couldn't shake the fear. Was he here out of obligation? Or something more? One evening, as they walked along Chancellor Park under a cascade of fairy lights, Sharon stopped beside the koi pond. Nick, why are you really doing all this? Is it guilt or nostalgia? Nick looked at her, brows furrowed. It's love, Sharon. Maybe not the kind we had when we were 20. But it's real. I don't need you to be perfect. I just want you to be okay. She blinked back tears. I don't know if I'll ever be okay again. He cupped her face gently. Then let me believe for you, until you can believe for yourself. Act IV. A public breakdown. The storm they had weathered privately finally blilled into the public eye. One morning, Sharon arrived at Crimson Lights to find a crowd gathered. Reporters. Cameras. The tabloids had gotten wind of her fragile mental state, thanks to an anonymous tip, likely from someone inside Newman Media. The headlines were cruel. Sharon spirals again. Will she be institutionalized? Her hands shook as she tried to open the door to the coffee house. She dropped her keys. That's when Nick arrived. He didn't hesitate. He strode into the crowd like a force of nature, shielding her from the flashes, the questions, the judgment. This woman has survived more trauma than any of you could imagine, he shouted. And she's stronger than all of you combined. If you have questions, direct them at me. He escorted her inside, slamming the door shut. Sharon collapsed into his arms. I can't do this anymore, she sobbed. Yes, you can, he said. And you're not doing it alone. Act V. A night's confession. That night, Nick made her dinner. Her favorite chicken piccata with lemon zest risotto. As they ate in silence, he finally spoke. I didn't just show up that night because I was worried. I came because I never stopped caring. I tried to move on, Sage, Chelsea, Sally. But no one ever felt like you. Sharon stared, wide-eyed. I thought we were past that, she whispered. So did I, he admitted. But then you called, and it felt like destiny catching up to us. She put down her fork. Nick, I'm still broken. Then let me help you rebuild, he said. I'm not promising a fairy tale, but I am promising to stand beside you, whatever that looks like. Act VI. The damsel rises. Weeks turned into months. Sharon returned to therapy. She began speaking again at the women's shelter. Her strength wasn't instantaneous, but it was steady. With Nick's quiet support, she found herself again, not just the counselor or the mother or the grieving widow, but the passionate, sharp, resilient woman who had once survived cancer, loss, betrayal, and still walked with grace. One afternoon, Faith surprised her with a visit home. She walked into Crimson Lights and found her mom leading a meditation group, laughing as she guided a dozen women through breathing exercises. Afterward, Faith hugged her. You look happy. I am, Sharon said. Not because everything's perfect, but because I stopped waiting to be rescued. Faith smirked. So, Nick? Sharon smiled. He didn't rescue me. He reminded me I could save myself. Epilogue. The Armor and the Flame. Nick watched her from across the park that evening. Sharon stood on stage, giving a speech for World Mental Health Day. She was radiant. He remembered the woman who once clung to him for survival. Now she stood tall, alone, commanding the crowd with eloquence and fire. When she stepped down, he approached. You were incredible. She took his hand. You always say that. It's always true. They sat on the bench together, their shoulders brushing. I don't want to be a damsel, Sharon said. Not ever again. Nick looked at her with admiration. You're not. You're a queen. And I'm just here, wearing the armor, ready to defend the kingdom if you need me. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Not because she needed to, because she wanted to. The early morning sun bathed Genoa City in golden light, but inside Sharon Rosala's living room, there was a chill that sunlight couldn't reach. Crimson Lights hadn't opened yet, but Nick Newman stood awkwardly in front of Sharon, coffee in hand, rehearsed words ready to fall from his mouth. Again. I just want to be friends, Sharon. We have a great history, but let's not make it complicated. Sharon offered a tight smile. Right? Friends. But that wasn't what his eyes were saying. They lingered too long, softened too much. His hands accidentally brushed hers when he handed over the cup. His tone had an edge of intimacy that betrayed the so-called friendship. And Sharon, as much as she hated to admit it, felt the warmth rush to her chest. Act I. Mixed signals and missteps. Nick had made it abundantly clear after their last serious attempt at rekindling romance that he wanted to keep things simple. No messy entanglements, no blurred lines. But that hadn't stopped him from calling her late at night to talk about the kids, or bringing over takeout after her therapy sessions just to check in, or watching movies on her couch until 1 a.m., only to leave with a forehead kiss that lasted a beat too long. Sharon had tried to draw boundaries. She even attempted dating again. A few coffee dates, a weekend out with an old friend, but none of them could compete with the ghost of Nick Newman, the man who always said he didn't want her but never left her orbit. One evening, as she closed up the cafe, he appeared again. I was just walking by, he said, holding up a bag from her favorite Thai place. Thought you might be hungry. She narrowed her eyes. You were just walking by with my favorite takeout? He grinned, not bothering to deny it. Okay, fine. I thought you might want company. Act I.O. Denial in a suit. Sharon wasn't the only one confused. Her friends noticed it too. Nick's playing both sides, Maria said bluntly over brunch. He says one thing and does another. He doesn't want to commit, but he doesn't want to let go either. Sharon bit her lip. He's always been protective. Maybe it's just that. No, Mom. Protective looks different. This is territorial. He doesn't want you to move on. Sharon hated how right Maria was. Later that week, she confronted Nick after yet another one of his late-night drop-ins. I need to ask you something, she said, arms crossed as she blocked the door. Are you here because you're lonely, or because you're still in love with me? Nick's face clouded with the trademark Newman discomfort at any emotional directness. Sharon, come on. You know I care about you. That's not an answer. I don't want to ruin what we have, he deflected. What if we try again and fail? We've been through too much to go backward. She nodded slowly. Then stop acting like we're something we're not. Stop showing up at my door. Stop hugging me like I belong to you. Nick didn't say anything, but the next night he showed up anyway. Act I. The other woman problem. Things came to a head when Sally Spectra re-entered the picture. Nick had told Sharon he was keeping things casual with Sally, that it wasn't serious. And yet, photos of them together at a charity gala splashed across GC Buzz. Arm in arm, looking every bit the devoted couple. Sharon tried not to let it hurt. She tried to act unaffected, but the pain carved into her heart anyway. So when Nick showed up the next morning with an apology pastry box, seriously, raspberry turnovers, and weak excuses, she let loose. Do you enjoy making me look like a fool? She asked. What are you talking about? He said, genuinely puzzled. The gala, the press. You said it was casual. It is casual, he insisted. It's not what it looks like. That's the thing, Nick. It never is. You say one thing and do another. You don't want me, but you can't stand the thought of anyone else having me. You say you're with Sally, but you're here every night. You tell me we're friends, but you hold me like we're still in love. Nick sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. It's not that simple. It never is with you. Act IV, caught in the crossfire. The tension between them spilled into their families. Faith, back from college for a visit, saw it immediately. Why are you letting Dad play yo-yo with your emotions? She asked bluntly. I'm not, Sharon protested. Then why do you light up every time he walks in? And then when he leaves? Even Noah, normally more reserved, chimed in. You deserve someone who knows what he wants, Mom. Not someone who's trying to juggle old flames and new distractions. Sharon was beginning to see the truth. She wasn't the damsel waiting to be rescued. She was the one stuck in a tower of her own making, climbing up and down the same ladder Nick held steady and then pulled away whenever she got too close to the top. Act V, the final straw. Everything finally cracked one night at Chancellor Park. Sharon had agreed to meet Nick for coffee, just as friends, as always. But he showed up with Sally. They hadn't spoken to Sharon beforehand. They didn't even seem to think it would be an issue. Sally smiled awkwardly, and Nick acted like nothing was wrong. Hope it's okay, he said. We were out and figured we'd drop by. Sharon looked at him, then at Sally, and then laughed bitterly. You're unbelievable, she said. Sharon, come on. No, I've let you get away with this for too long. You say we're friends, but you string me along. You say Sally's casual, but now she's here playing third wheel to your ex. Do you hear yourself? Sally raised her eyebrows but wisely stayed silent. I'm done, Sharon said, voice trembling. No more late-night visits. No more mixed signals. You need to figure out who you are, Nick Newman, because I already know who I am, and I'm not your backup plan. She walked away without looking back. Act VI. The aftermath. Nick didn't call for a few days. He didn't text. Sharon felt both relief and grief wash over her in alternating waves. She missed the comfort of his presence, the familiarity of his voice. But she didn't miss the ache of not being chosen. And then one evening, he showed up again. This time with nothing in hand. No coffee, no excuse, no smile. "I hurt you," he said, "because I was afraid. Afraid of failing again. Afraid of choosing wrong. But the truth is, I have chosen. I just didn't have the guts to admit it." Sharon stood still, arms folded. "I told myself I could have you in my life without loving you fully," Nick continued. "But I can't. I love you, Sharon. I always have. And I think I always will. I've said one thing and done another because I was too scared to risk everything. But the bigger risk is losing you forever." There was a long silence. "You don't get to keep doing this," Sharon finally said. "If you want me, mean it. If you don't, then go. But I won't be your halfway house." Nick stepped forward. "Then let me prove it. No more back and forth. No more games." She studied him for a long moment. "You've got one chance." He nodded. "That's all I need." Epilogue. A promise kept. Weeks passed. Nick didn't flinch. No mixed signals. No appearances with Sally. No vague texts or emotional backpedals. He showed up, not just physically, but emotionally. They started fresh. Dates, real ones. Conversations that weren't about the past, but about the future. Sharon still had her doubts, but Nick had stopped saying what he thought she wanted to hear and started showing her what she needed to see. And that finally made all the difference.